Hello, everybody. Happy Easter, and you're all hopefully on your way home. I'm just doing a quick video here before I finish off my work for the Easter, and then obviously if you have any questions for me, you can always send me an email. Email is here. So you know the ending for the school. I'm just going to leave that part there, and you can fill it in. Okay, so question is, the UK has done and is doing everything it can to support countries hampered, not harpered, which I said before, by international conflict. Notice that it here shows that it's international conflict in general. However, Boris Johnson's statement, we need to discuss it with reference to one global conflict. So discuss being that you give both sides of the argument and you make your decision by the end. So throughout you're going to say, here it was effective, here it wasn't, blah blah blah. We're referring to the UK. We're going to talk about how it has been supportive of countries affected by this global international conflict. So basically what we're doing here is we're talking about the role that the UK has played in global conflict. One global conflict. Obviously the most useful one for us to talk about is going to be the one that we've gone through in class recently, and that is the effect on the Ukraine, how the UK has been involved with attempting to resolve or lower the impact of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and what it has done successfully, what it has not been doing effectively as a result of some of the barriers that we have, such as NATO, and so on and so forth. So starting off over here, what is your link sentence? I've written one for you, but again, please do rewrite this link sentence into your own words. It might also be that you have your own particular opinion on this conflict, and you need to make sure that you consider that. So the UK has played an integral role in how the international conflict between the Ukraine and Russia has unfolded over the past 31 years. That is very true. If you would like to change this to 21 years, 22 years, because we're looking at the concept of this being in the 21st century, let's remember, and that we're going to make sure that we very rarely refer to anything before the 21st century unless it's required. So what we could do here is we could change this to 21 years or 22 years. We do need to know some background information, but it's going to be very, very briefly mentioned, if you do mention it at all, that the disbanding of the USSR happened in 1991. Again, it is before the 21st century, and as a result of that, it's just background knowledge that we can refer to very, very quickly. If it weren't for the disbandment of the USSR, Ukraine would not exist, so Ukraine comes into existence. Worth noting that the UK and NATO were partially responsible for the disbandment of the USSR, the breaking up of the USSR. So we'll say partially involved in this after the Cold War. Now, we come down to the Budapest Memorandum, and yes, it was signed in 1994, which means that it is pre, let's say, 21st century. But what happens is when we come over to the annexation of Crimea, and when Crimea was basically taken from the Ukraine, that was a breaking of the promise of the Budapest Memorandum. So it is possible to refer to this in the context of the 21st century, and we will make sure that we do that. So this was signed by the UK and the USA and Russia, and it was signed so that Ukraine would be basically left alone by Russia in return for the disarmament of its nuclear weapons. So Ukraine left alone by Russia. Russia will respect all of its borders, and as a result, the UK did have a positive impact as a part of NATO and these negotiations associated with the Budapest Memorandum. So NATO and the Budapest Memorandum lead to basically 20 is it 10 years, 20 years of peace. And a significant portion of that was during the 21st century, so 2000 to 2014 were peaceful years, as were the 6 years after the Budapest Memorandum was signed. So you could say that that was effective. However, as this was not law, it was an agreement. It did lead to the kind of annexation of Crimea, which is basically that when in 2014 Russia decides to invade Crimea, both politically and territorially, and decides that they're going to attempt to recover Crimea from themselves. They think that they're the stronger group when they compare themselves with Ukraine. So Russia believes that Crimea belongs to Russia. They actually believe that Russia is a common territory between the Ukraine and Russia, but they think that Crimea, because of its location, should have a stronger presence there. And so what happens as a result is that Crimea becomes part of the Ukraine. The UK has to impose economic sanctions to deal with this. But what we're going to note, though, is that has this been effective? Well, no, this has not been effective. This has, but over here, the sanctions are not effective by blocking things like, let's say, trade between Russia and places in other parts of the world, or by suggesting that fines have to be paid by some of the richest people in Russia, or by brands and things like that not being allowed to locate themselves during that particular time in history in Russia. Those economic sanctions clearly did not have the effect that the UK wanted them to have, because Russia currently controls Crimea and will do for the foreseeable future unless something is done about it after 2022. So it hasn't been effective to the point of Crimea becoming part of the Ukraine again. Still part of Russia. And important also to note that until 2022, nothing else got taken away. So maybe the economic sanctions did have a bit of an impact on Russia not trying to take control of any other places around the world, or around Ukraine. Now, in 2022, obviously we know that the war in Ukraine is currently ongoing. People are reluctant, UK for example, reluctant to call this a war. Reluctant to say that it is the UK are reluctant to say that it is genocide happening, and they're leaving that to international bodies to decide, which again you could suggest is not very effective. However, the UK have gotten involved with more sanctions. For example, over 1,000 oligarchs, which are basically very, very wealthy people who have a bit of a control on the government of Ukraine, or some kind of tie to it. So over 1,000 individuals, including oligarchs, have been sanctioned. Their possessions taken from them within the UK, so those possessions have been taken away, definitely having a bit of an impact on the way that people view Putin, thinking about the fact that if this hadn't happened, they would still own those possessions. Then again, these are very wealthy people, so it may not be something that is having too much of an impact on their wealth at all. And then when we look at what they've supplied, what the UK has supplied the Ukraine with, they've given over 10,000 missiles, and then they've given 4,000 anti-aircraft tanks, anti-tanks, to go along with those missiles, so they've been able to protect themselves. And what you could note is that overall this has been something that they've done effectively. The UK has kind of limited, alongside NATO, the Russian advances. Russia has not gotten to where it wants to be to a certain extent as a result of the UK's and NATO's involvement with this. Okay, so I hope it goes well for you. I hope this question is something that suits your style of writing. I'm not going to do a peel paragraph or anything like that, but if you do need support with those structures, you've got plenty of assess structure resources. We've done plenty of assess and discuss questions before, so submit this answer to me across the Easter half term, and I hope you all have a nice restful